So a big welcome to this talk. We're going to be talking about harvest mice in Devon. And Simon, if there's anything you think of, do just interrupt or send me a message, won't you?
Will do.
Lovely, thank you. Now, the bad news is this is my, this is my sort of backup plan. So I'm afraid I've tweaked the slides tonight, and there are a couple of slides that are slightly different that I haven't therefore edited. So yeah, if they're slightly out of date, I would tell you about them. So this is what we're hoping to talk about tonight. We're going to, one of the housekeeping messages was about actually, if we have any technical problems, please bear with us, we will get it sorted. But we've done that bit already. So I'm just going to close that. So an introduction to Devon's small mammals. We're going to talk about small mammals in general. We're going to talk about harvest mice, and then we're going to talk about the Devon Harvest Mouse project in particular. I'm then going to tell you about what we've discovered so far through our project, and I'll mention very briefly the national project and how you can get involved if you want to. Okay, so if you fancy getting in touch, these are the best ways of doing it. So on Twitter, you can follow us on Harvest Mice DVN, as in DVN for Devon. We've also got a Facebook page as well, which is Harvest Mice DVN as well. So if you're on Facebook and you want to find out more about surveys and what we're up to, do give us a follow on that. If you've got any queries about anything, then yeah, there's an email address there where you can send me an email, ask me questions, or if you've got anything you're sort of particularly interested in and I haven't addressed, then by all means, send me a message. Okay,
Sarah, we're not seeing that. We're still on talk out.
So you can't see the introduction page?
Yep, see that. That's it. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So can you see the page that says Introduction to Devon Small Mammals?
We can, yes.
Excellent. Good. That's a big relief. I don't need anything else to go wrong tonight. Okay, so here we go. We're going to talk a little bit about mammals. So to get you thinking, first of all, I've got a question here for you to answer at home. I'm hoping, Simon, you can see that. Can you let me know if you can?
We've got a bit of double slide showing, blocking out how many small mammals there are in the United Kingdom. We've got mammals are there in United Kingdom, but we've got the numbers.
Okay, right. So I'm afraid I've given you the answer already. I don't know if you can see that. It's very frustrating, this. So Simon, I'm afraid I'm going to need you to do a double act with me and let me know if you can't see things. So we're going to be co-hosting this. So I don't know how many people thought there were, but I know the first time I heard this, I was absolutely stunned that there should be 105 different types of different species of mammals in the United Kingdom. So yeah, so you've got the answer to that one already. I don't know, Simon, can you see the next slide?
You just went on to it and went off it again.
Okay, has it come back?
Not yet. Still on the ringed one, but it's now gone black and white.
Okay.
There we go. Pictures.
You've got pictures. Okay, so I'm going to just read you what I can see.
We've got two slides together there. Actually, the pictures are on half the screen, and then we've got script on.
This isn't working very well, is it? What about if we had a slight commercial break and came back in 10 minutes time, and then Simon, you and I can have another look? Would that be okay?
That might be wise because it's a bit overrun at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not working very well, and I want people to have a good experience and not be put off by this. Does that sound okay? So if people leave your cameras off and yeah, just maybe make a cup of tea, come back for 8 o'clock, and hopefully by then you'll hear us no doubt in the background trying to get things sorted. But I think that sounds quite a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. So Simon, stay on the line at the moment. I'm just going to restart my laptop. And
okay.
I'm going to stop sharing. Hopefully I can do that. Let's see if I can do, so I can stop broadcasting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so stop broadcasting, I can still hear you.
Okay.
See you now.
Excellent.
And is that through your laptop or through your?
This is through my iPad, and of course everybody else will hear at home as well. But
okay.
What I'm going to do is I'm just going to restart my laptop.
Okay.
I don't understand why we've got this problem when it worked so perfectly earlier.
No, absolutely.
Quite frustrating. I'm afraid there's a cat about to Zoom bomb as well. Right. Okay.
So you.
Right. I'm just going to restart the laptop. Go on. You're not helping. Thank you. Right, switch user.
Yeah, I'm still there.
Right, sorry, I'm just going to restart my laptop. It will take a few minutes, which is why I think 10 minutes is a good idea for people to. Have you ever had this happen before?
No, I don't know why I should pick on
For
you.
everything.
Yeah.
Right, so the computer's just busy shutting down. I just feel that if you're not able to see the slides that I can see in front of me, it makes it quite difficult to.
What it was doing was it was rather than transitioning from one to another, it was doing incomplete transitions and double projecting it with some penetration there.
And that's strange because, of course, what I could see was absolutely perfect. But...
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll try again. Sorry, it takes a few minutes to shut down. I can't believe that.
Don't worry.
If all else fails, I've got this copy of.
You have, haven't you? We knew there was a reason to send it to you.
And
we could share your screen and you talk to it, Sarah. Just say next slide.
Yeah, I can do that. I'll restart the laptop anyway, and then we can have another go. But that sounds a really good backup of a backup plan.
Yeah.
I'm just really perplexed because this has never happened before to me either, and I've done these so many times.
Too many people using the interweb.
Yeah, obviously. Actually, there are a few talks going on tonight, aren't there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice to see. That's my, yeah, that looks familiar.
That does.
Is that showing?
Yeah.
Yes. It's not showing as slideshow format, but it's certainly showing these slides.
So can you, John, can you shuttle between slides on that? Okay.
Just hold on a second.
Yes, you can. That's slideshow then, is it?
That is sickening.
Okay. Well, why don't you talk to that? Is that the easiest thing?
The only downside is, of course, it's got 2 slides that are out of date on there, as in I've tweaked them since. But I don't think that will matter too much compared to no show at all.
You can talk to those.
Which one's that showing then? Is that showing just the
introduction to Devon small mammals? Oh.
And is that now showing harvest mice in Devon?
No,
that's just showing introduction to Devon small mammals.
Oh right, okay, I see what's happening. Your screen. Right, sharing is right, okay. Oh, it's showing that one. Right, okay. That's it. Yeah, okay.
So meanwhile, I'm just restarting the laptop here, just in case.
Just in case, it may work.
Well, if in doubt with computers, you shut them down and you try again, don't you?
Full system reboot.
Absolutely.
Right, John, you've stopped sharing now.
Right, well, it should come.
Yeah, okay, coming back again. Okay.
What's that showing? Introduction to?
Talk outline, introductions and housekeeping, that's showing. Can you click between slides or not? Yes, you can.
How's that?
Yeah, that's the first one.
The outline though, it's not actually showing the whole slide.
It's not showing the whole slide.
It's showing it with the thumbnails to one side of it. So rather than being slide show, it's actually showing the talk as written.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
It's not set up as slideshow, is it now at the moment?
No, it's not. I'm just wondering how to get at that now.
There's
presumably
you press the button at the bottom right hand side that has got the rectangle with the line coming out of it.
That one you were hovering over just now, John. Click that.
We've got 5 minutes of our commercial break left.
I mean, if necessary, what we could do is we could just run it as this, and you just click on the thumbnails, and it'll come up, not full screen, but it'll come up most of the.
At least people will be able to see it.
Yeah, they'll be able to see it that way.
Yeah.
That may be more secure than most of the other things we're trying to do, I think.
it's on John, go to top. I mean, top left from the beginning.
Yeah, I tried that, and it's not.
It's because it's
Let me-
gone to the Dropbox. It may have lost some of its functionality.
Okay.
Let me just let me just stop it and.
Well, that was a risky thing to do.
No. I have every confidence.
I had every confidence this worked perfectly. Yeah. And you saw it work. That's what's so bizarre about it.
Absolutely.
And show, that's better. Right, okay.
I feel a great deal of sympathy for you, Sarah. It's,
Well,
Absolutely.
you're not personally responsible for the IT system not working.
I know, but I feel it.
I know.
Right. So I'm just getting mine up at the same time.
Show presenter view. Right, okay. How does that now look?
Can't see anything at the moment.
Right, no, it's because I.
Is it because I made it editor? No, view only and not edit, do you think?
Wait a minute.
I could share it again with that.
Right, okay. Just on a sec. Let me just share screen. Right, share screen. That one. Right, let's do that. How does that look?
That's good.
Wow, it works.
Good.
And can you
That works.
John,
Yeah.
just change slides.
Yeah, I'm just trying. So next slide.
Yeah.
Right, is that okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine.
And can
Okay.
you go to previous slide and see if that works?
Just on a second. Previous slide, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It'll run like that then.
Okay, so just tell me when to change slides and
Yeah. I'll be able to say next slide, please, John, won't I?
should be
We will.
in
We will.
business. All right.
Okay, before we let people, or before we start again, can I just try it again? Or mind you, I'll get that feedback again. Should we just quit while we're ahead?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
that's what we should do. Okay.
Yeah,
because I
fine.
think
So stay where you're at the moment, because I still need to open mine so that I can see what I've got as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, and is the view of me okay? Because I know it's a sideways
Perfect.
view now, isn't it?
That's fine. That's fine.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to just shut my laptop then, and I won't worry about that.
No. Okay.
That might not have been the most sensible thing to do. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So we've got 1 minute left for our commercial break, but
The good news for those of you who are slowly coming back to us is that we think we can manage this by projecting the slides from the depth of Bovey Tracy and Sarah talking from home and me keeping my fingers crossed.
you and me both. Yeah.
Right.
All right. I'm just going to unlock my laptop as well so that if I need some facts and figures, I can do that. Okay, so right, John, could we go on a few pages to the page that says Introduction to Devon's Small Mammals, please? Thank you. Yeah, and the next one. Lovely, thank you. And the next one, please. Super. Right. Okay. Well, I am really sorry to all the people who, who've been watching and feeling the pain here, but we are finally back on track. So we're going to do it with a team effort. I'm going to talk you through the slides, and John's going to turn them over. So the first one says about how many small mammals or how many mammals are in the United Kingdom. You've seen that already. 105 is a surprisingly big number. So John, the next slide, please. So this is a bit of a breakdown of how many mammals there are, how many different species and things. So there are 28 native terrestrial mammals and 2 marine native mammals, 18 species of bats. Now, actually, that's 17 breeding species of bats. 13 of those species, as in 13 species of mammals, have been introduced or have naturalized. Yeah, I'm not going to read the rest. 25 cetaceans and things, you can read the rest for yourself. All that information comes from the Mammal Society. And John, if you could turn over for me, please. Thank you. So here's a bit of an ID challenge then. The page I expected to come up was actually one that had a breakdown of different types of mammals, but this is absolutely fine. Let's go on to something fun instead. So have a quick look through, see if you can name all those small mammals. Now, obviously, I won't hear if you get the answers right or not. So yeah, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I know that Bobby Tracy's group is full of experts, so I'm fully expecting lots of right answers. So yeah, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds to have a look through. Okay, so just to go through them from left to right, top to bottom, you all know about hedgehogs and things, and we've got bank voles, there's a wood mouse there, and then the next mouse, so the middle picture, thank you, John, I like the way you're pointing, you probably noticed that looks very similar to the wood mouse, but it has got a band across its neck. This is yellow, and that's called a yellow-necked mouse. It's quite a feisty little creature. I haven't yet found them in Devon, but their range is definitely expanding. The next one, so the centre picture, that's a common shrew. And then obviously we've got a hare, European hare there. Bottom left, we've got a lovely stoat. And then in the middle there, we've got a weasel. In fact, I got some lovely photos of weasels last week. And then of course, my favourite animal, I'm not really biased, is the harvest mouse on the bottom right down there. Thank you, John. Next page, please. I'm trying to resist the urge to say next slide, please. Okay, so what are small mammals? Well, small mammals in the UK are made up of voles, mice and shrews. And according to the IUCN, they make up half or over half of all mammal species. We're going to ignore the mean body size bit there. That's not actually true in the UK, that's sort of worldwide. In the UK, because we've got beavers, and of course they weigh quite heavily, they would send the average up a bit, or the mean body size up a bit. Some species, though, are absolutely tiny. So the world's smallest mammal, for example, the Etruscan pygmy shrew, weighs only 1.8 grams, which is just a teeny tiny amount. It's really hard to imagine quite how little that weighs. Next slide, please. I wasn't going to do that, was I? So there is one missing on this list, and actually I felt a bit silly when I discovered I'd missed one out. But so these are the British small mammals. We've got bank voles, field voles, Orkney voles, water voles, house mouse, wood mouse, yellow-necked mouse, harvest mouse, pygmy shrew, common shrew, water shrew, and you'll get the pun in a moment. I missed out the silly shrew, which is a bit strange, but anyway, don't go quite next yet, thank you. We're going to be talking mostly about Devon's mammals, and of course we don't have Orkney voles. We don't have the yellow-necked mice as far as I'm aware, but we do have all the others. Next slide, please. So we're going to go through the different species, break them down a little bit. So wood mice, I'm sure you've all seen wood mice. They've got that lovely sandy brown fur with a white grey underside. They're fairly grey when they're small, and they get browner as they age. They've got this sort of protruding eyes. They've got quite bulbous eyes, large ears and a really long tail. The long tail does have some hairs in it, unlike rats' tails, for example. The juveniles are greyer, we've just said about that, but they've got large feet, especially their hind feet, and they look almost like kangaroo-like because their back legs are so long. Their tails are longer than house mice. So you're unlikely to see them next to each other, but it's quite useful to know that. Lifespan, they only live a very short time. They sort of live up to about 9 months in the wild. So very few adults will actually see one summer and then the next summer afterwards. Okay, let's go on to the next. Oh, before we do, you'll see there's a footprint there, just under there it is. So I put some footprint tunnels down, and that's the footprint of a wood mouse. That's its hind foot. And you'll see there's a picture of one that I caught in the trap as well, when I was small mammal trapping up at Devon Wildlife Livestock Reserve. Okay, next slide, please. I have to say this is quite an odd process to do today. So yellow-necked mice, I have never caught a yellow-necked mouse, and I'm quite glad. They are quite feisty things. You know that you've caught a yellow-necked mouse because as you approach the trap will probably be jumping around, and you'll hear them busily trying to get out. If you get one in a mammal bag, then they'll be jumping around, and yeah, they also nip a bit as well if you handle them. So They look very much like the wood mouse. The fur is brown on the back, white on the underside, but you have got that beautiful yellow band of fur across the neck, which you don't have on wood mice. Some wood mice will have a partial band, but they won't have a complete band. Okay, they also have large ears and protruding eyes and a long tail. The tail is a bit longer, and of course, because they're bigger, they weigh a lot heavier, so up to 45 grams. Yeah, it says about the average life expectancy is only 3 to 4 months. Now, that sounds quite surprising, and I don't know if you can see me at all, but I've got a picture here of Britain's Mammals, the book that I think is absolutely fantastic, and that's where the information came from. Okay, next slide, please. The website you can see on the bottom right there just refers to where I got the pictures from, because they're not my photos if they've got a website next to them. Right, so the house mouse. Now, I've never actually knowingly seen the house mouse. Lots of people have mice in their houses and they assume they're house mice, but actually they're probably or more likely to be wood mice. This is a house mouse. You can see it's a lot grayer, and it's got that sort of buff coloured tummy. It hasn't got that white underside that the wood mice and yellow-necked mice have. A lot shorter tail as well, so they're smaller bodied, smaller tail, weigh up to 22 grams, so that's half the size of the yellow-necked mouse. Signs that you might notice in your house to indicate that you've got them, and you might have droppings, the sort of patches of urine. The urine smells quite strongly as well. They make quite untidy nests, and we'll talk about nests obviously for harvest mice in a little bit. And you might notice they have they leave food leftovers wherever they've been as well. If you're interested, if you think you've got mice in your loft or something, the way to tell the difference between a mouse dropping and a bat dropping is you roll it between your finger. I'm very sorry, we're being seen by a cat here. So if you roll the droppings between your finger and they roll, then that's going to be a mouse dropping. If it crumbles to dust, then that's a bat dropping. So quite often I'll get called out to people who think they've got mice in their loft. Turns out they've actually got a bat race. So yeah, be interesting to sort of try that if you've got any at home. Okay, obviously washing your hands afterwards. Right, next slide, please. Thank you. So here I've got an introduction to the different voles that we've got. You do see quite a lot of bank voles and field voles, and you can tell the difference by the length of tail. I've also got a photo there. You can see the bank vole at the top left has got a very short tail. That's about 30% of its body length. And a field vole would have a tail that's about 50% of the body length. You've got a nice, lovely chestnut brown bank vole on the bottom left there. Again, that was one that was caught up at bystock. And then at the bottom of the field vole, you can see the nest that it makes. It's quite an untidy nest. We will talk about the difference between field vole nests and harvest mice nests in a bit, but you can see it's quite big. If you look at my hand, it's sort of overflowing the edges. It's quite untidy. Yeah, and it's also made of really short bits of grass. And then the water vole on the far right, you would be quite lucky to see those, but I saw one recently at Dawlish Warren. So if you're down there and you hear a plop, then you're likely to have heard or a water vole disappearing. I put pictures of the footprints there, and they leave quite distinctive droppings as well. They look like Tic Tacs, little green Tic Tacs, about the same size with rounded edges. So they're quite distinctive. If you get one of those, there's absolutely nothing else it can be. And then the bottom photo shows how they make quite often a little burrow into the bank on the side of a river or a stream or something, and they have that lovely distinctive hole with like the shorn bits of grass, so they leave a lawn as an entrance, so they could chop all the grass back, almost like they've cut their front lawn in front of the house. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so here are the shrews that you might find in Devon. The common shrew is certainly one that I see more often when I do small mammal work. So I see quite a few of these around. I also see their back view quite often because I've got lots of trail cams out across the county, and they tend to be taken, when I get them on camera, they tend to be disappearing out very fast, and you see their tail rather than the actual front of them. They're very cute little things, quite fast moving. They're insectivorous, of course. So when they're in my small mammal traps, they're after things like mealworms and things like that. The pygmy shrew is far smaller. So you can see that's my hand there. You can see how very, very tiny they are. it's not actually my hand, that's someone else's hand, but you can see the hand there, and you can see how they just fit onto the palm of your hand, really, really small, whereas the common shrew would be about 8 centimeters long. The water shrew, much, much bigger. If you look at the other two, they have a bit of a contrast between their sort of back fur and their tummy fur, but the water shrew has got a really clear delineation between the two. And the photo at the bottom right shows a water shrew under the bridge at Bystock Ponds, taken about probably 2 years ago. That was our first recording of the species up there. And since then, I found quite a few by doing owl pellet dissection. So that seems to be a more reliable way of finding them. There aren't that many around, and they are quite hard to see. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So there are lots of different ways that you can use to find small mammals. There's small mammal trapping. I've got a picture of a Devon Wildlife Trust trap here that I borrowed from Wooder. So this is a well-filled trap, and what you do is you put some bedding in there so they're nice and safe and warm overnight, and they don't suffer at all by being kept in the box. You have to be very careful about what time of year you trap, so they're not too hot, not too cold or anything, and you put a food supply, including things like apple and things, so they've got something to get moisture from. And then there's a very well-behaved wood mouse just sitting on the trap there, looks slightly shell-shocked. That particular mouse, I think I caught 4 times in 5 days. So he obviously realised that if you went in there, then he would get food and lodgings overnight, definitely the same mouse each time. And he'd just sit there and wait for you to sort of process him. So I'd weigh him and check the sex and things. And then, yeah, off he'd go. And virtually every night he came back. So he obviously wasn't that traumatised by the whole process. Okay, next page, please. So apart from small mammal trapping, you can also, and this is a lot more accessible obviously, can look for signs, things like holes in banks and runs and things like that. So there's a lovely picture of a bank bowl hole there. They're perfectly circular, often in a vertical sort of surface, and that's one that was taken again at Bystock, just in the banks as you go down between Wright's Lane and the first of the ponds. And if you look at that bank on the left-hand side, there are dozens and dozens of those where they've got lots of runs. Somewhere that might be slightly nearer for members here, Greenway in the boathouse. There's a lovely bank vole that sits outside their entrance there that poses for the camera nicely as well. So worth a look if you go to Greenway. Okay. There's also an app that could be quite useful if you're interested in doing this. It's called Mammal Mapper. It's launched or run by the Mammal Society, and it means that you can go for a walk, and as you walk along and you see tracks and signs and droppings and things like that, you can record what you've seen, where they are, and all the records go back to the Mammal Society so that it can collate all the information. It's a really useful app. I really like it. Okay, next page, please. Of course, another way you can do to look for small mammals is you can build hedgehog tunnels. This is one that I built. You can buy them, although they aren't exactly cheap. This is one I made from sort of like plastic sheeting from B&Q, which is about £5. I made 3 traps. And then what you do is you have your food in the middle, and then next to the food you have some masking tape that you paint, powder paint mixed with olive oil on, and then you have 2 pieces of paper, one at either end. And then the next day you go back, you hope the slugs haven't eaten too much of it. And then you get left with a sheet of paper, hopefully with lots of footprints. And then by using this fantastic book, which I'm going to hold up and I hope you can see, maybe Simon, if you could nod your head if you can see it.
I can see it, yeah.
Yeah, super. This book here is called How to Find and Identify Mammals. Really useful guide. It's got lots of footprints in there so you can check what you've actually found and match them up so that you know whether you're looking at, say, hedgehog or rat or bank vole and things. Okay, next page, please. I've missed out droppings, but obviously if you find scat around, that's a good way of identifying mammals as well. And this is my trail cam invention that I'm quite pleased with. So I built a sort of long rectangular box out of pine. It's planked from B&Q again, so quite cheap, with a perspex lid, trail cam at one end. Now, the modification I've made recently is that they all have a gap either at the top or at the side, so that if you get a predator coming in, the small mammals can escape through the edge, through the other end. And then you might notice I've blanked out the lights at the top, and that is because if you have too much in the way of infrared light, then it drowns out the photo, because if it's in a box, then obviously the light doesn't need to be quite as strong as it would do if it was shining onto a woodland or a meadow or something. And that photo on the right hand side is one of the voles I got from that camera. There's also, you might notice there's a little lens stuck over the top of the camera as well. And what I did there is I bought a pair of cheap reading glasses, took the lens out and stuck the lens on so that it changes the focal length, so it can take photos a lot closer to the camera than it would do if it was just in the box without it. Okay, next page, please. Okay, so an introduction to harvest mice. So now we're going to talk about harvest mice in particular. Next page, please. Thank you, you're very good at this. So what are harvest mice? Well, I think they're very special. I'm highly biased, I know. I've got one running around in a tank right opposite me at the moment. They're our smallest British rodent. The scientific name is Micromus minutus, and minute is exactly what they are. First described by Gilbert White in 1767 as the less long-tailed field mouse, and I'm very glad that they changed that to harvest mouse in 1776, because my job title would be a real mouthful if they hadn't. What makes them particularly special is they have a prehensile tail, so they can use their tail as a fifth limb, so they can quite often anchor themselves onto places. So if they're climbing up a stalk, they can wrap their tail around it and hold on. Then if they lose their balance, they can just dangle from their tail, or they can use it to help them climb, guide their way down the stem, all sorts. So very, very useful. The other thing that I think is special about harvest mice is they build a beautiful spherical nest that's normally above ground. It said lifespan up to 18 months. Well, if they actually survive a year, they're doing pretty well. Captive mice can live up to 2 years. You can see that map at the top right hand side. That shows you the range that's currently recorded in the UK. So they're found as far north as Yorkshire, but there are a scattering of records in Scotland, especially around Wick. Having been to Wick and camped up there, I think any harvest mouse that's up there is quite brave, really. So so there are a few records up there, and I don't know if people have heard, but there's the Mammal Society have in the last 3 weeks started another national survey, and Derek Crawley, who's the harvest mouse guru for the country, is currently up in Scotland looking for harvest mice. So that map may change over the next few weeks. Next page, please. Thank you. And yeah, that just tells you about they're officially listed as uncommon, and of course they're protected under the UK Wildlife and Countryside Act, and they're listed as a biodiversity action plan. The Mammal Society is quite concerned about numbers dropping, and the problem we have is that actually there is no real baseline. We don't know exactly how many there are, and we can't really tell whether numbers are drastically falling, whether people are recording less. It's all very hard to sort of keep a tab on what numbers are doing. They're not a European protected species like bats or dormice, for example. So when people are doing building work or about to sort of build housing estates on fields, they don't actually have to mention them in their ecological reports. And certainly just up the road from me, there's beautiful habitat for harvest mice. The ecologists found at least 7 different nests. And when you go through the ecological report, they're not even mentioned. They did mention the spiders, but they didn't mention the harvest mice. And that's something I'm hoping to change. Okay, next slide, please. So ways that you can identify harvest mice, well, they are pretty small. Body length is up to sort of 5 to 6 centimetres or 13 centimetres if you include their tail. They weigh about 6 to 8 grams, and that's both sexes, male and female, are about the same size. The fur on the upper side is that beautiful sort of golden brown colour with a white tummy, and it's very clearly delineated, just like with the water shrew that we saw earlier. Juveniles, though, are very grey brown, and certainly the baby I've got in the tank at the moment that got rescued from the River Otter, that is still a very dark sort of grey colour, and that's about 3 weeks old. They don't change that lovely golden brown shade until they're sort of 6 weeks and they've molted for the first time. And the older they get, the more sort of golden brown they get. they have lovely hairy vole-like ears. So whereas wood mice, for example, have got great big protruding ears that stick above their heads. I don't know if you can see me doing this or not. The harvest mice have got tiny little ears that are really hairy. Wood mice have got really translucent ears. So yeah, so you're looking for a mouse with a fairly sort of sharp face, pointy face, with tiny little beady eyes, blunt nose, and yeah, and those little hairy vole-like ears. If their neck is sort of touching the ground, then it's much more likely to be a vole. If they're sort of able to lift their head up off the ground, then it's much more likely to be a harvest mouse. Having spent many hours, years looking at loads of photos from small mammal chaps, sort of maybe 10,000 photos a week, sometimes I look through. Sometimes it can be a bit confusing to tell the difference, but the thing to look is, you know, really at the size, because they are so much smaller. They have got that prehensile tail that we mentioned earlier. In fact, if you look at the background, you can see how that harvest mouse, one of Dave Smallshell's photos, he's actually wrapped his tail around the stem at the back to hold on. And that tail is quite, you know, it does have some hairs on it. If you have a bat detector, they do make some ultrasounds, and they have an opposable outer toe on their hind feet, so they can grip with their toes onto stems, which is quite different from any of the other mice and voles that we've talked about so far. Next slide, please. Lovely. Now, I'm hoping this will work. We might have to see, because of course this is now on a different device. It might not, but we'll press play and hope, cross our fingers. No, never mind. If you'd been able to see that video, then it would have shown you how the harvest mouse scuttles up the stem. Yeah, thank you for persevering. Oh, it's working. I'm impressed. Okay, so it's a little bit juddery, but you can see. So you've got those small little ears, so they're not sticking, they're not protruding over its head. It's using its opposable toes that goes down the stem as it's holding on there. Its tail doesn't have to be permanently wrapped around things, but you will see it uses it when it needs to, and it can grip on with that. You can see the little tiny ears there. They are always active. You never see a harvest mouse sitting still. In fact, if you see a harvest mouse, you're doing really well. They tend to hear people coming, and so they run a mile before you get anywhere near. These are actually captive mice that have been filmed in a sort of naturalistic environment. This is, I shouldn't tell you this, should I? This is Dave Smallshell's handiwork again. Absolutely beautiful footage that there is no way you'd get any other way. So you can see those beautiful eyes. They're not bulbous like the wood mouse eyes or the yellow-necked mouse. You can see the lovely white underside and that lovely golden fur as well. They're sniffing around. They are very cute. And then I think it's going quite slowly, this video, but the next bit will show you how it goes down the stem and holds on with its tail as it goes. You might not watch the whole thing, but we'll just give it another moment to see. It's just about to go down the stem. Here it goes. You can see the opposable toe on the outer, on the hind foot. And there it is. I love that bit. It's pretending to be a seed head. It's like, you can't see me. Okay, next slide, please. Just peeking out now, looking very cute. Okay, so harvest mice spend most of the time living amongst the vegetation above ground level, so in the stalk zone. If they're alarmed, so if they have a bit of a fright or they sense a predator coming or hear a strange noise, then they will drop straight to the ground and they land very softly. They're mainly nocturnal in the summer, but during the winter time, they tend to be more active during the daytime, so it's diurnal then. And during the winter time, they quite often live or spend a lot more time at ground level as well, so in the bottom of tussocks and things. All the books will tell you that they don't make burrows themselves. However, I've actually found quite a few of mine do make burrows, so I'm not convinced about that. But the books will say that they occupy burrows made by other rodents. Certainly, if you're looking in the bottom of a tussock for harvest mice, you would see quite often that they'd be in the same tussock as a field bowl, for example. And where you get the field bowl runs, you quite often get harvest mice using those. If you were to try live trapping, the best time is September or October. And the reason for that is that's when population numbers are at their very highest. However, live trapping is incredibly difficult. So you need to have something like a very sensitive well-field trap or Longworth trap. And you need to, it needs to be able to trap something that weighs 4 grams. So it's very difficult to catch them. certainly on those fields I was telling you about up at the top of Exmouth, I had 50 traps out for 9 days, and the harvest mice sat on top and left their droppings on top. They left their droppings on the apple inside the trap, but not one did I catch, which was a real shame because the idea was to catch them and release them somewhere safe. Winter mortality is very high, so by March about 70% of them will have died, and that's because they're very susceptible to cold weather, and they don't hibernate, so they live a very short time, and the winter months are really tough, not just for food supply but also just for keeping warm and surviving that way. Next page, please. Thank you. So if you're thinking about where to look for harvest mice, they have a range of habitats. Grassland, rushy meadows. We're really lucky. We've got all this lovely common grassland and Dartmoor and elsewhere. Millennia is fantastic for them. Dry reed beds and actually quite wet reed beds as well. I've discovered recently they quite like sewage works as well, having been around a fair few with southwest water. So where you've got reed beds and sewage works, you do find quite a few nests there as well. They quite like crops and things, but of course we don't have so many crops as places like Wiltshire and places, so we tend not to find them in crops as much as we might do elsewhere in the country. Inland marshes, if you've been up to Braunton Burrows or Northern Burrows, both those have quite a few harvest mice nests. It might look really inhospitable, but actually you do find nests there, which certainly the day I turned up at Northern Burrows and looked, it was like, I don't think we're going to find them here. And we actually found 3 nests quite easily. So yeah, so never say never. Ditches, bramble patches. I'm a little bit wary about records that come through from brambles because dormice quite like brambles as well, and it's sometimes quite hard to tell the difference, but we'll talk about that soon. Verges. If you see a verge on the side of a road with lovely long grass, that's a really good place to look. Heathland can be useful, especially where you've got tussocks of long grass growing up through the heather, and I mentioned Millennia already with the common grassland. Next page, please. So harvest mice eat quite a range of things, and that of course varies according to the season. So fruit and berries and seeds make up their sort of main diet, and then some invertebrates, so caterpillars and things like that. Yeah, I have seen them trying to eat shield bugs of all things, butterflies and moths, and sometimes fungi and mosses as well. Now, I don't know, I've never seen them eating mosses myself, but I have certainly seen them eating mushrooms and fungi. And recently when I was on a DWT reserve, there were lovely mushrooms with tiny little teeth marks. And the mushrooms happened to be next to long tussocks of grass. So I will be going back there to see if I can work out what was actually eating those fungi. Be lovely to see, but you can see little tiny teeth marks, little indentations on the top of the mushroom. Next page, please. I have to say my harvest mice are much more fussy. I can put Tesco's best mushrooms in with them and they don't touch them, but I can but try. Okay, so predators. Well, we've already said that lots of harvest mice die each winter from cold and starvation. By March, of course, the food supplies are dwindling and they're getting, so not a good time for them at all. But in addition, they are quite a favoured food of virtually everything. They're right at the bottom of the food chain. So barn owls and stoats and weasels, crows, foxes, and of course, cats can be a problem as well. You've probably already seen that I've got a cat. But yeah, I'm very careful, obviously, about keeping it in and not going out at night and bells around their necks and things. But certainly one of the problems we seem to have in Devon is that lots of lovely habitat at the moment is being built on. So around Exeter, Pinhoe, Alpington, lovely habitat in those fields, and it's all disappearing. And as we said earlier, they don't have to report those species are there, so they don't have to mitigate for them at all. Then when you do get houses, you also get people moving with cats, and those cats go off and hunt. So Ludwell Valley Park, for example, has quite a few harvest mice, but most of our records come from dead ones being left by cats on the path, unfortunately. We do find a few nests, but their numbers are definitely going down. And being right in the city, we don't know how big their gene pool is either. So it'd be quite interesting to see how things go over the next few years about whether their numbers are sustainable and whether they get whether they suffer more from inbreeding as time goes on. Next page, please. So there are various threats apart from predators, agricultural practice, so intensive farming methods and things, pesticides, crop rotation. I don't know if people know Killerton very well, but their forestry yard is right on the edge of the motorway, and there's a lovely field there. And the corner of it was left with long grass and actually had a few odd sunflowers just growing in the side. Nobody knew quite why. I imagine it's bird seed that had escaped. In that tiny little patch that was what 10 meters by 10 meters and triangular, so not even 10 meters squared. In that tiny little patch, we found 8 nests in what 10 minutes or something, and even December, the mice were still breeding there. We put cameras there, we got lovely photos, lovely footage, and then the next summer it was all ploughed up and put to crops. And since then, we've had the camera there for 2 years. We've never seen the harvest mouse since. We've looked in the hedgerows, we've looked in any long grass around. I'm sure they will be low numbers somewhere, but we just can't find them. And that's not for want of trying. Habitat destruction is quite a problem. Not so much over here, but certainly sort of around Norfolk and places, wetland being drained and things like that. Another issue, it's not necessarily a threat, but an issue is lack of information and people not being able to identify them correctly. So probably under-recorded. There's also that lack of knowledge about harvest mouse ecology as well. So yeah, when people have to mitigate for different species, they're not included in that. Another issue well, they have a naturally occurring boom and bust ecology. So like field voles, they have a sort of a cycle of you have very few and they build up and build up and build up, and then you'll have loads and then they suddenly crash. But extreme weather conditions can really interfere with that. So I don't know if people remember the beast from the east a few years ago, but we had hundreds of nests before that, and then the next year we had very, very few. So that was a real factor. The sort of the weakest possible time for harvest mice being March. We then had those 2 severe bouts of weather, and numbers absolutely crashed that year. Promptly followed by having a very dry summer and therefore the vegetation not growing very much. And that gave very few places for them to breed because the grass just wasn't long enough. So yeah, a really poor year, and we're still gradually building up from that. Next page, please. Okay, so there's a little picture here to sort of break the monotony of me talking. This was me trying out the harvest mouse cam that I designed. So this is filmed inside a tank. I don't think the video will work. I seem to remember it's actually just a still actually. But I do have video footage of the mice running in and out of that log. And you can see that's taken just 15 centimeters away. So really, really close and absolutely in focus. This is Harriet, one of my captive harvest mice. And again, you can see the small little ears, the cute eyes, they're not bulbous at all. And those very cute little sort of front feet, they're very small and delicate. Next page, please. So how to find harvest mice. If you're curious about going to look for them, this will tell you about what to do. So next page, please. So harvest mice make ball-shaped nests. They have 2 different types of nests. There's the breeding or summer nest, and then there's a single-use nest, which is not disposable, but it is used by just one mouse by itself, so a solitary nest. Solitary nests are ping pong ball size. I can show you one in just a moment, and they're occupied sporadically year round. So if you find a single use of solitary nest, do leave it in situ because the harvest mice will know where it is and they go back to it. Right, I've put down at the bottom there. I'm going to go back actually. If they're breeding nests, they're a lot bigger. I'll show you lots of photos in a moment. I've put beware vole and dormouse nests because they look similar, but they do have quite a different structure. So vole nest, do you remember that big photo or the big nest in the photo earlier where it's quite loose? It sort of fitted across my hand and spilled out over either side. They're quite sort of hairy looking, and they're made up of really short, lots and lots of really short pieces, and they delaminate. So if you pick them up, they don't stay together as one body. If you picked up a harvest mouse nest, it would stay together. Dormice nests also look quite similar, but they're a lot more woody. So if you actually gave one of those a squeeze, it wouldn't squeeze very much at all. Next page, please. There's a picture of a solitary nest, but we will come back to that. So summer nests, these are the breeding nests. This is where the females have their babies. They're sort of, on average, 8 to 10 centimetres in diameter. If you're in somewhere like Sussex, and I think probably it depends a little bit on the material that they use, but certainly around Arundel, their harvest mice nests seem to be about 12 centimetres in diameter. So that's an interesting sort of foible. But yeah, so they tend to be tennis ball size, really. They can be, the books will tell you that they're 30 to 40 centimetres above ground, but that does depend on the sort of summer and the sort of vegetation. So for example, where we've had a really dry summer and the vegetation hasn't grown up very much, the nest would be very low. If we've had a good summer for vegetation, they'd be quite high. They're woven firmly amongst the vertical stems, so sometimes they have an obvious entrance hole, but normally the mums close it up as they leave the nest, so it's left closed and the babies can't escape. But they're woven so firmly into those vertical stems that they can't blow out. So for example, if the tussock of grass gets knocked or something, or there's heavy wind, heavy rain, then it can't actually roll out. The nests are usually amongst grass, but sometimes you get them amongst bramble and scrub or heather and things. We've talked about where to look before, haven't we? And the breeding females will build several nests a season. Remember that they make them out of grass that's alive. So the grass is green, so they start off as green nests. And then as the nest ages, so over the next fortnight or so, they fade to straw coloured. If you happen to find a nest that's got green grass in it, then it's highly likely to still be in use. So do leave well alone, even if it's just a few green strands. Their droppings are identifiable. I don't know if people know what vole droppings look like. So they're like field vole droppings, but they're brown in colour and they're tapered at one end. So they're very thin at one end and rounded at the other. Quite often you'll find them on the top of a nest or inside the nest itself after the mice have gone. Obviously, don't stick your finger in if you think there could be any chance of having babies inside it. Okay, next page, please. So here are some pictures of breeding nests or summer nests. You can see they're sort of about the same size as the palm of my hand. You've got the one in the middle there that is sort of quite easy to spot because it's against green vegetation and it's gone brown. And then the nest on the right hand side is still green. Can you see it's still got quite a lot of green grass still growing through it? And that's because that nest was actually in use. So I had a bit of a shock with that one. So I'd been on a survey with friends who'd found nests outside their house or along the riverbank near their house. And then this must have been the year before, and they only found them because they were strimming. They were cutting back the grass and these things fell out and they were harvest mouse nests and they felt absolutely terrible about it. So they let me know, and the next year I went to have a look with them. We looked for hours and we couldn't find anything. It was a grey November day, freezing cold, the light was going. And as we were walking back to the house, I kept saying, oh, just look here, just look there. And they were getting fairly fed up, obviously needing their cup of tea. And this was about probably 10 metres away from their front door as we went back. There's this tiny tussock of grass. And I said, oh, I just need to look here. And they laughed. And I went, and there was that beautiful nest. Now, that was at ground level, so not typical at all. You can see it's got quite a lot of green. I didn't know at that point green nests were still in use because you don't see that in the books. So I went along, I gave it a bit of a squeeze and it moved under my fingers and it still had babies in it. So I covered it up very carefully and retreated as soon as possible. About 3 days later, unfortunately, the river flooded. So hopefully they were virtually independent and able to escape. But yeah, so if you see a nest with any green in it, leave well alone. They don't ever reuse their summer or breeding nest though. So that is one that you can take. So if you've got one that's tennis ball size, completely brown, and you want to take it home, you can. And the reason for that is when they make them, they're very, very tightly knit, tightly woven. And as the babies grow, the babies are about the size of your thumbnail. So when they're born, so as the babies grow and get bigger and bigger and bigger, they obviously stretch grass and make it bigger. And therefore it's not as sort of, the thermal properties aren't as good. So by the time the babies are mature, it lets too much air in and they can't actually reuse it. Okay, next page, please. So there are some pictures here of different breeding nests. You can see that nice one here on the top left, held between two hands. Again, that's a sort of fairly large one. That's about 12 centimetres. on the report form that I asked people to fill in, it asks people to measure the nest so that I've got a good idea about how big they are. And it seems that year on year, they vary quite a lot. So last year we had a lot of small nests, so about 7 centimetre on average. The year before we had nests that was sort of about 10 centimetres on average. So yeah, it varies. And of course, some nests are made out of Phragmites, so they're harder to weave and therefore they tend to be slightly bigger anyway. 3 nests at the top right hand side, they were found by National Trust wardens up in North Devon. The one with a green coat and a purple glove, that was found at the Donkey Sanctuary in East Devon. The bottom right is quite an interesting one because that was found in Crocosmia. Now, there was nothing suitable there for the mice to weave. What they like to do is they go into their grassy tussock and they select the grass that they're going to split into lots of vertical sections, and they weave it around those stems. But Crocosmia is too tough to weave, along with rushes and things. So what they've done there is they've actually carried the grass over to somewhere that they deem suitable and built their nest out of grass that they'd picked. So quite an unusual nest. And you can see that some of them look quite coarse looking and some of them are made of really finely shredded grass. Now I'm just looking for my box here. I just happen to have a few nests to show you. I'm hoping that people can see. It's quite unnerving not be able to see what you can see. But so I've got a nest here in front of me. John, can you nod your head if you can see it? Oh, sorry, Simon, can you nod your head if you can see it? Thank you.
Yeah, we can see it.
Lovely, thank you. So quite often when you find a nest, there will be all sorts of rubbishy bits left on top, almost like camouflage. So if you just lift the rubbishy bits off, I'm just going to put that down there, you can see you've got this beautiful woven structure. So what they do is they go into the, oh, sorry, that way. Thank you. Can you see it? Yeah. Thank you very much, because I'm looking for where the webcam would be on a laptop. I'm not looking in the right place. So you've got this lovely finely shredded grass and it's all woven in different directions. So if you're looking at a vole nest, it's going to be short little pieces and they're going to be stacked up on top of each other. This is all woven in lots of different directions. And if I did a pinch test like that, it stays in one piece. So so that's definitely a harvest mouse nest. This is a breeding nest. It's about tennis ball size. And I have got a solitary nest down the bottom here. Now, this has been soaked by rain many times and dried out, so it's not as good to see, but it's a lot smaller. You can see I can hold it between my finger and thumb. Thank you, Simon, very useful. It's also made out of coarser grass, so it looks slightly different as well anyway. It's also a little bit old, so it's shredding lots of bits, but you can see all the different directions. And yeah, but it's like a sleeping bag. If you think about the size of a harvest mouse, this must be virtually woven around it. It must be very snug inside. It's very small. So if I show you the two, Simon, maybe can nod if you can see both. Yep, thank you. So you can see the difference there between a breeding nest and a solitary mouse nest. Now, knowing what I do now, I wouldn't take this away if I found one. I'd leave it in situ. But this one is the one they can't reuse. If you get one that's quite tight, then it probably means the nest wasn't successful. And very occasionally you'll find that one that's had like a can opener effect at the top, and that's where a weasel or a stoat has opened it up and taken all the babies from inside. So you normally find one entrance hole. I'm just going to have a rummage for this one and see if I can find the entrance hole. I think, oh, here we go. I'll just show you. There's an entrance hole just there. It's normally quite difficult to see the entrance holes because, of course, if the hole is left open, then the babies can escape. And it does tend to be the mammals will close them up. But carefully posed photographs quite often have a neat, handy hole at the front, just to make it nice and easy to spot. And I've got another nest here. The females will quite often build several nests before they're happy. This one's got a clearer entrance hole that you can see. And very occasionally when you look at a nest, if you look inside it, you can sometimes find failed pups, which is not a nice thing to find really. But next page, please. So solitary nest. Now the photo on the left is a breeding nest, okay, and I put that there just so you've got the size comparison. You can see it takes up all 4 fingers of the person's hand. If you look at the nest on the right hand side, that's a solitary nest. So breeding nest on the left, solitary nest on the right hand side, and it's just about 2 fingers wide. Obviously she's wearing gloves, So yeah, allow for that, but it really is quite small, sort of 4 to 6 centimeters. So yeah, just about the same length as the harvest mouse body. Next page, please. Last season, we had quite a few different types of nests, and a bit of a puzzle as to why. Some of them were much lower, and we think that was because the vegetation hadn't grown up terribly high, what with the dry summer and lack of height to the vegetation. So they quite often be either just around the outside of the tussock tucked underneath, or they might be at the very bottom of the tussock. So it took quite a lot of looking for them. Sometimes if you're approaching a clump of grass, you can look at the top and you can see how you've got sort of grass just sort of, you've got the nest sort of fairly high, but actually last year we had to really rummage and part the tussock and look right to the bottom for them. Yeah, we've talked a bit more about the lack of vegetation, and it does mean that we had quite a few nests in probably suboptimal places. We don't know how that affected numbers or anything, but there is a theory it could have led to low success rates. We also had different shapes of nests as well. So normally nests are that lovely tennis ball spherical shape. We had a few more that were egg shaped, and that could have meant that people didn't record them because they weren't sure quite what they were. My tip would be, if you find a nest, have a good look at whether the pieces are long and whether they're woven. If they're long and woven, it's highly likely to be harvest mouse. Next page, please. I have got a flow chart to show you at some point. So a few more pictures of harvest mice nests there. And the next page, please. If you look, that one at the bottom right with Jess Moulcombe, you'll see she looks very happy. That's because we'd done a 2-hour survey with lots of people. And then she finally found a nest right at the end as we were about to go home, and made my day because I thought we weren't going to have any luck. Beautiful habitat, found absolutely nothing until then. So in case you get the bug, and I apologise in advance if you now can't go for a walk without looking in long grass. The first thing to say is it's probably just as well to have a pair of gloves on. You never know quite what's going to be in the vegetation. Can get brambles and sharp edges to the grasses, but I did once find a baby adder as well. So it's not difficult to look for harvest mice nests at all. It's not rocket science. But you need to think, first of all, a bit like a harvest mouse, where would be a good place to hide? If the vegetation is see-through, so you can look from one side and see through out the other side, it's not good enough for a harvest mouse nest. It needs to be pretty dense. If you could hide a dog's tennis ball or something in it, then that's a good place to look. And all you do is you use both hands, you part the grass or the reeds or whatever you're looking through as far down as you can, and you look through the whole clump for a spherical nest. Once you've done the middle of it, you then look around the outside, so that if there are any solitary nests, they tend to be at ground level around the outside of the clump. And yeah, always worth looking around the outside too. Watch your eyes doing it. It's quite easy to get a bit carried away and get seed heads in your eye, and it's not pleasant. The other tip is to remember which ones you've looked through. It's very easy when you're standing up, looking down, to forget which ones you've looked at. And the next slide, please. There should be a photo coming up fairly soon of Meath Nature Reserve. Yeah, here we go. So this is actually Ashmore. Lovely tussocks. That is harvest mouse heaven. So if you see anything like that near you, that is definitely worth a look. If you don't fancy looking yourselves, maybe drop me an email and I will go and have a look. But that, yeah, that's just crying out for harvest mice. So you go to the tussock, you'd have a look at the top surface first of all, check where the seed heads are so that you know not to get your eyes in them, and then using both hands you just part them all the way around, all the way down to the bottom, and see if there's anything inside. On a normal year where you have good vegetation growth, they'll be towards the top. Obviously last year and the year before they were very low down. And then you can see what I mean about looking around the bottom, can't you? You search on the bottom, and quite often, especially if it's later in the season, the wind will bash down the vegetation, and you end up picking the vegetation up and looking underneath. And that quite often is where you find the nest, where the grass bends down, blows down, and gets sort of stuck down as well. It's also easier not looking when it's been very wet. So tomorrow wouldn't be a good day to go out and look, because the vegetation when it's wet sticks together and it's not much fun. That's where I say about remember where you've been, because I don't know how many of those I did twice, and I don't know how many I missed, but I did an awful lot. Didn't find very many nests there. We found 30 the year before. That time I didn't find any. This is after the beast from the east. And then several other people came and helped. We didn't find any. And eventually on the 4th trip, we found one nest between us. So it just shows how numbers can vary a lot. If you don't find any and it looks good habitat, it's worth getting in the next year. Next slide, please. Thank you for being there already. So a bit of a quiz for you. If you're looking at that view, where would you look? The next slide shows a grid for you to look at. So the same picture, but with a bit of a grid so that you can sort of decide where you think it might be a good place to look. Next page, please. Thank you. So you might notice it's got a nice hedgerow there. Well, if you found a nest like a harvest mouse nest in the hedge, more likely to be a dormouse nest. You might remember dormice are a protected species, so you don't want to go randomly squeezing their nest or anything. But if you find a nest that you think is a harvest mouse nest and you squeeze it and it doesn't have much give, then that is going to be a dormouse nest. I'm just going to find a nest for you to demonstrate. So here's my lovely harvest mouse nest. I'm hoping you can see it. Simon, nod your head. Lovely. So if I squeeze it, can you see it's got quite a lot of give to it? If I did that with a dormouse nest, it wouldn't squeeze at all. Okay. Right. So the hedge we've ruled out. You can see there are some bits of long grass. If you look at C3, there's a slightly longer tussock of grass. If you think back to earlier when I told you, thank you. Excellent, John, thank you. If you think back to earlier when I told you about that walk where we looked for ages, didn't find a thing, and it's grey and miserable and wanted to go home, that nest that you saw is inside that tussock inside C3. It was only about 12 inches high. It wasn't very high at all. So completely atypical, but it is very dense. You could hide a tennis ball and you certainly could hide a nest in there, as I found. Next page, please. So here's my ID key to sort of help you work out what you're looking at. And again, I'm going to pick up my lovely nest to demonstrate it. So it's a little bit small on my screen. I'm hoping you can see it okay. It says, is it made from long, thank you, long woven pieces of grass or vegetation? Remember, it doesn't have to be grass. It could be Phragmites or something. So this one here, yes, it is made out of long bits. It does have some short bits, but it has got quite a few long pieces as well. I'm now destroying this nest all over my sofa. But anyway, so I'm going to say, yes, it is made out of long pieces. They're not all long, but some of them are. Next one, so we follow the yes along and it says, is it the size of a tennis ball? Well, yes, it is. So we go up again to the next one. Does it squeeze without much pressure? So I'm going to give it a bit of a squeeze. Yes, it squeezes really easily. So follow yes. And it says, likely to be a harvest mouse in summer or breeding nest. If it didn't squeeze easily, then it's likely to be a dormouse nest. Okay, so let's choose the other nest that I had earlier. Right, here we go. My sofa is now covered with grass, but anyway, all worth it. So here's my other nest. It says, is it made from long pieces of grass? And yes, it is, definitely. If it was made of short pieces, about 1.5 inches long, then that would be feasible. So yes, it is made of long pieces. Is it ping pong ball size? Well, yes, it is. It's not tennis ball. So I'm going to go down to, is it, yes, thank you. And then, yes, it is ping pong ball size. So it's going to say, you found a solitary nest made by a single harvest mouse. Solitary as in by itself. If we go back to the beginning and imagine it was that first photo of a field bowl nest made of those really short pieces, it's really untidy. So is it made from long pieces? No, it isn't. We go down to the bottom and it says not a harvest mouse nest, it could be a field bowl. Okay, next page, please. If you're interested in seeing a copy of that, do email me and ask to be added to the mailing list, and I can send it out for you. I regularly send it out to everyone who's on the mailing list just to give them a few reminders about nest identification. So, Simon, are we doing okay for time? Are you happy for me to carry on a bit? Lovely. I know we had a late start, didn't we? So the Harvest Mouse project itself, let's go on to the next page, please. Now, I think this is going to be where I put an extra slide in and we're not going to have it. So I'm going to ignore the record slide. Could we go back a slide, please? Thank you. So the Harvest Mouse project is funded or run by Devon Mammal Group. Been running for about 5 years or so. This is now its 6th season. And it's a project that's run by a project officer for 2 days a week, although during COVID last year, we actually only had a day a week. We've had 2 different project officers. People might remember Peter Cooper, who did it for the first year, and then I've been in post ever since. It runs between October and March, and that's a nest hunting season. So we don't want people looking for nests when they're actively breeding. So we send people out to look from October onwards, and then we finish the survey once the mice are breeding again in about March, so that people aren't disturbing active nests. We've got lots of different sort of facets to the project. So we will have training sessions where we train people about harvest mice ecology, what different nests there are, what to look for, things like that. Pretty much like the talk we've had tonight. Then we also have group surveys, so that if people want to go out and survey but don't want to do it by themselves, or are lacking confidence and aren't quite sure about their ID skills, then we can do it all together. And the other lovely thing about that is that when you've got lots of other people with you, you cover a much bigger area of ground more quickly. And if one person finds a nest, it makes the whole thing worthwhile. Another aspect is that we're working with landowners to help them manage their land sort of sympathetically for harvest mice. And we're also, we have a trail cam project as well. So that I've got 6 trail cams that are out across the county in places normally that we know harvest mice are likely to be. And then we can look at which areas are particularly good for harvest mice and get lots of harvest mouse photos, and which areas are maybe not quite so good. And something we're hoping to do this year is we're hoping to have an owl pellet dissection survey as well. So that will mean that we collect owl pellets, or hopefully work with the Barn Owl Trust to collect owl pellets, certainly under license and everything. And then we'll train people how to dissect them, what they're looking for, and that will give us an indication. If they find harvest mice jewel bones in those pellets, then we know that we need to look at the habitat nearby and see if there's anywhere in particular that we need to look for harvest mice. Next page, please. So what we ask people to do is we ask people to submit their records so we can see where people have looked and where the harvest mice are present and where they're not as well. Really interesting having nil results, although I think people are probably less likely to submit them. I think they think they're either doing something wrong, or they haven't looked hard enough, and they don't think actually there aren't any harvest mice. So if you do go out and look and you don't find any, I do still need to know, because it's really useful information. So we ask people to submit their records using a SurveyMonkey form, which takes about 4 minutes to do. And the lovely thing about that is it can be filled in wherever people are out and about at the time. You don't have to go back and find a piece of paper or load a website or something from your home computer and email a form or anything. So really quick and accessible. Hopefully that means that people therefore are more likely to do it. And certainly over the last couple of years, we've had 180 people respond so far. I still get a few emails saying about, oh, I found a harvest mouse, but then I have to get back to them and say no, and ask for the information that's on the SurveyMonkey form. So the SurveyMonkey form is definitely making my job a lot easier. And it also means we can interrogate the statistics a lot more easily as well. We also have a QR code, which you'll see if you, I don't think we'll see it on this slideshow, unfortunately, but it was on the one on my laptop, a QR code so that people can download the record form nice and easily. And I can send that to, maybe I can send it to Simon or somebody to share if it's appropriate. We also have a Twitter feed, of course, and we have lots of posters out and about advertising events and surveys and things. The Facebook profile as well, just to sort of encourage people to join in. Results can be emailed, and also I quite like it when people take a photo of their nest, because then I can verify that they really are harvest mice nests, unlike getting them confused, for example, with field vole nests. So next page, please. I should have mentioned, so this is can we go to the next page, please? I don't think that's going to be quite so useful. Lovely. Yeah, thank you. That's a slide that wasn't meant to be there. Okay, so this gives you a bit of an idea about where we've done training sessions. It's not quite as good as the version that I tweaked earlier, but never mind. So it shows you we've done, this is right up to date, but it shows you roughly where we've covered training sessions and things with people over the county, so quite a good spread. I've missed a couple off on Dartmoor, unfortunately. I only realised this afternoon after I got back from work. And we've had quite a few group surveys as well. I'm trying to do more of those, and in fact was contacted by somebody from Buckfastleigh today, so we're hoping to have a group survey in Buckfastleigh fairly soon. So if you're interested in coming along, you'd be very, very welcome, and details will be in the newsletter, as in the Harvest Mouse newsletter. Next page, please. The lovely thing about group surveys, you can see people gathering for one here. This is pre-COVID. The lovely thing about group surveys is you get that element of competition. So people want to be the next person to find a harvest mouse nest. And then you get people saying, oh, I found 3. And then, yeah, the competition is great. But if you don't find a nest, you still have that lovely feeling about it's been a worthwhile trip. So you know that between you, you've had a good attempt at looking for nests. And so, for example, I had a survey at West Hawkerland on Saturday, had a group of 5 people, so not as big as that survey, and we combed the area really thoroughly in an area where we'd found lots of nests over the previous couple of years, and this year we didn't find any. So that's a really interesting result, disappointing, but really interesting. The area had been grazed quite differently, so I suspect it's due to that. There wasn't much of the tussock left, but yeah, just having that group bit just means that instead of going home dejected thinking, oh, I can't do that, I didn't find any nest, you know that between you were to find them if they were there. And if you do find them, you get that feel good factor as well. Next page, please. So yeah, COVID unfortunately did have quite an effect last year. We obviously had the restrictions, meaning that we couldn't meet and go out on training sessions and things. We had lots of group surveys that got cancelled. And it also meant that some survey sites that we've monitored for the long term weren't monitored quite as thoroughly as normal. We had a few survey hubs where we go back year after year and do exactly the same repeated survey. And of course, we couldn't do that. But hopefully this year we get the footprint tunnels and the owl pellet analysis going we weren't able to before. We're nearly there now. Next page, please. So here are the latest maps and results. Next page, please. Thank you, John. You're doing a great job. So this is a brand new map. This map has literally, it's the map that we started at the beginning of October. So it's been in action for, I think, 10 days now, because, yeah, that was when I first started sending stuff out to people. You can see we've already got 5 different hectares on there that have gone yellow. Yellow hectares are where harvest mice have been looked for and found. And the green dots show you actually, thank you, I love this, you can be my pointer next time. So the green dots show you where the nests actually were and the surveys took place. They don't have to be formal surveys. It could be that someone just walked along the footpath or walked in their back garden if they're very lucky and got a big garden with suitable habitat and they found nests. You'll see there's also a little black square there. That's the West Hawkerland survey on Saturday, where we sadly didn't find any nests. But this map gets updated with all the Survey Monkey information that comes in. And then next page, please. This is what the map looked like at the end of last season. So yellow squares are squares where nests were found, and red squares were squares or hectares where people looked but weren't lucky. And the blank ones are where people didn't actually manage to get out and survey. So yeah, there are a fair few fairly near to people watching this, I think. The green spots, you can see there are some yellow squares without green spots, and that's because we ran that map for 2 years. What with COVID, we weren't sure how many people were going to get out and about. So the green spots represent last year's surveys. Next page, please. This shows the overall results since we started. So the green squares or the green hectares are where we have found harvest nests in the last 5 years, and the red ones are where we've never found them. Obviously, there are a few around the edge that still haven't been surveyed. Some of those represent really tiny areas though, and they might be sort of like the Plymouth one where it's all very built up and not suitable. Next page, please. We are probably going to fly through these, but these show you how I can use SurveyMonkey to interrogate it for results. So it shows you that most people looked, for example, in those green areas, the field edges. The purple bits represent the rough grasslands. So this breaks down where people looked and also in the months people looked at those areas as well. Next page, please. So what colour was the nest? Now this is quite interesting. So yellow is mostly brown nest, but with a few green bits. So they're likely to still be in use. You can see in October, November, there are still quite a lot of active nests around. Then as you get to sort of November, December, January, February time, there weren't very many active nests. And then by April, they're starting to breed again. So you had a few more yellow bits there. It's not quite a smooth line, but you can see that either end of the survey season, thank you, next page, we were more likely to get active nests. And of course, then I'd say to people, I think we ought to stop looking. This is where you can see how wide the nests were. So if you do get the chance to find a nest, knowing the diameter is really useful. That yellow chunk shows you how many solitary nests were found. And then the ones further down show you the breeding nests. Next page, please. This is quite useful. So I asked people to say how long it was before they actually found a nest. The red block at the bottom shows people who didn't find a nest at all. Some people were very lucky and found a nest inside 5 minutes. Now, I think that might have been where they were walking through a lovely habitat and thought, oh, I'll just look down here. This looks good. And so they found them quite quickly. And lots of people were looking for 15 to 20 minutes or 25 to 30 minutes before they found anything. And quite often I can be looking for an hour before I find anything. I do tend to say, excuse me, I do tend to say if you're looking in suitable habitat for an hour and you don't find anything, stop looking. Because if it was suitable and you were going to find anything present, you'd have found it inside that time. Next page, please. Okay, this is about squeezing the nest. This is to help me verify that they really are harvest mice nests. So it felt slightly squeezy. That's going to be a harvest mouse nest. It felt very solid. Nobody put that. And some people didn't try squeezing it at all. And that was absolutely fine. It might have been a green nest. And of course you don't squeeze green nest. Next page, please. So how far was the nest from the nearest water? Now this is interesting because I've got a sneaky suspicion that harvest mice like being near water bodies. So you find them quite a lot along marsh edges or along streams and things. So it's quite intrigued to find out how far the nearest water was from the nests that were found. The results aren't conclusive at all, but I will persevere with that and see if we can find a bit more detail over the next couple of years. Next page, please. Had some really interesting feedback from courses. These are some of the little gems that I came up with that have been provided. Don't worry, if you come on a training session, I will never ask you to fill in an evaluation form. I think too many people do. However, these are some of the things that just cropped up in thank you emails afterwards. This one I love. My mum really enjoyed your course. At last she's seen the light and we're not going to mow the grass along the drove road. So this is from someone who was already converted to the idea of having harvest mice habitat, and her mum was not quite so keen. She said it looked messy and untidy. And after the course, they left it long, and they haven't found harvest mice yet, but it will happen. They've got harvest mice fairly nearby. Yeah, I only thought harvest mice lived in arable crops. I had no idea I might have them there. And that was a farmer who actually didn't know that he had them on his farm. This is my favourite. I'm not going to name the reserves officer, but if you're a DWT member, you probably know them quite well. This is my favourite. It says, you're welcome to look, but I've managed this reserve for 10 years and I've never seen one. Within 15 minutes, very nearby, we found 4 nests. And he took that very gracefully. He's been great ever since, helping us look after them and, yeah, manage the area very sympathetically. Next page, please. So what's going to happen next? Well, we're just starting the project again for this year. We're hoping to upgrade the trail cam so that we have faster trigger speed. You'll see some photos very soon. Be interesting to see how numbers fare at the end of this breeding season, because we suspect they're going to be quite down just by the poor weather in the spring and the very dry period we had afterwards. We're hoping to be able to compare data though on specific sites this year that we weren't able to last year. We're also contributing to the national project. So there's the National Mammal Society has also got a harvest mouse project. Slightly different methodology. So we're going to carry on with the same method we're using at the moment in Devon, where we go to suitable habitat and then look in suitable clumps of grass and things. Whereas the national survey is going to be more about transects and walking 200 metre lengths and then looking for nests along that 200 metres. Sorry, I'm just waving at things because I've got a cat about to jump on the iPad and I really don't want that. Yeah, we're also going to be trying out the Mammal Mapper app where it's appropriate as well. That's the app I told you about earlier, where you start your walk and then where you find a sign of a small mammal, you put it in, you take a photo, and then it can be validated by somebody up at the end by the Mammal Society. We're also hoping to run more training and volunteer events as well to carry on the good work that we started already. And we're going to be carrying on working with landowners to advise them about habitat management as well. Now, I can't see what you can see, but I suspect you probably just met Teddy. Right, next page, please. So this is one of the photos I'm super proud of. This is taken by that Harvest Mouse trail camera that you saw at, well, I showed you the sort of the wooden box with the perspex lid. You can see the screws there. Now I use the screws to hold on the bungees that support the camera, because you have to put the camera at a slight angle, sort of like that, so it faces down to the middle of the box. It's also quite interesting seeing how many small mammals will use it as a scent post as well. So virtually everything that goes into the trap will go and have a sniff first of all. I don't know if you've counted already, but there are 7 harvest mice in that photo. Now, I went through 25,000 photos before I found my first harvest mouse. So that was 3 months worth of photos and didn't find a single harvest mouse out of 6 traps in all that time. I then found one backside and got quite excited. Then I found a front view of a harvest mouse and got super excited, emailed out everybody on the mailing list. We've got about 350 people on the mailing list at the moment, and was really, really pleased. Then this is a different camera. This was up at Killerton, and this was Storm Derrick. And not having one harvest mouse, they had 7. They were having some sort of party there. Next page, please. Now, the next few slides are literally nice little photos to look at. This is the normal view I get of a harvest mouse. So you can see the backside, you can see the long tail, you can see that lovely sort of russet colour. So that's definitely harvest mouse. But normally I don't say it's a harvest mouse until I've seen the front view as well. The problem we have is that harvest mice are super quick, and therefore you don't often get the cameras triggering in time. Next page, please. You can see that I've baited a camera there with lots of bird seed and a few mealworms as well, because then because the harvest mice like mealworms as well, it attracts them as well. Now these obviously aren't harvest mice; these are wood mice. So you can see they've got millet there. They're just quite cute, I think. Next page, please. So the trail cams have run all year round. This is my apple thief. So it's a slice of apple, and this wood mouse decided he didn't want to eat it there. He wanted to take it away. I think he got through, or they got through 3 whole apples, which are in tiny slices within a week. So he obviously rather liked apples, and yeah, caught in the act there, carrying it away and looking straight in the camera as he did it. Next photo, please. Okay, something different. This isn't a mammal, obviously. This is a lizard, a common lizard. Again, this is up at Bystock. You can see that lovely millennia in the back there, so it's perfect habitat. I think I had gone through, so put the camera up in January. We were getting about 8,000 photos a week. Had never had harvest, well, hadn't in the last 25 years had harvest mice recorded before. And yeah, after many months of looking through thousands and thousands of photos, we got a lizard. And then I think the next week we actually got a harvest mouse backside as well. Very excited. We've done several searches for harvest mice nests since, and we found 1 half a nest. So they are definitely there, but not in great numbers. Next one, please. This is, yeah, I'm so proud of this one. This is a weasel. So it's a young weasel that was in the small mammal trap, probably not eating the sunflower seeds. It was probably sniffing around for the small mammals that had been using it. So if you're tempted to build yourself one of these small mammal camera traps, do build an exit so the cameras can get, so the small mammals can get out the other side. I don't know if the photo is going to be on here. Can we go to the next one? Thank you. No, I didn't put it. Could we go back again, please? Thank you. So the photo I haven't put on there is of 2 young weasels wrestling in that box that was taken just a couple of days later. Because of the amount of weasel activity, I then moved the camera to a different location. I felt that everything that was feeding from the box, and we had lots of bank voles and wood mice, I felt I was putting them at risk by having the weasels using it so actively. Okay, next page, please. So this is just a cute photo of Harvey. It shows he's obviously a harvest mouse, although he's pretending to be a hamster. You can see that opposable outer toe and his hind feet there, and that's how they hang on so nicely. And if you look at his tail coming out the back, it's wrapped around that stem, just to remind you about why harvest mice are special. I think that might be it. Next photo, please, or next slide. Is there anything else? Is that it?
Would appear.
That's it.
That was
Well,
it.
John,
done.
thank you so much for doing all the slide transitions for me. And to everyone listening at home, I'm so sorry we had all those technical problems, but we got there in the end, didn't we? Simon, all yours again.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you. It's definitely been worth waiting for. It's an excellent tour de force, and very well done indeed. And for keeping your cool in a moment of such adversity. Excellent.
Thank you.
I've no doubt that you've provoked quite a few questions, so I'm going to hand over to John, and I'm going to ask him to just put a few questions to you.
Yeah, of course, John might not have been able to compile them because he was busy turning over the slides at the same time.
Oh, a bit of multitasking. Thanks, Sarah.
Wow.
That was great. Don't forget, folks, to send in your questions. I've got a few here, but if you want to send in a few more, then direct them straight to me, and I'll fire them in Sarah's direction.
Thank you. Could we also people maybe if they could message any if they'd like to be on the mailing list, maybe they can send me a message with their email address on. You might not want to do it publicly, you might want to send it just specifically to me, but if you'd like to be on that mailing list and hear about future events, then do feel free to ask to be added on. Just going to, yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Okay, the first few are from Simon. So have there been any genetic studies of populations? Do mouse species ever crossbreed?
I'm not aware of them hybridizing at all, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I just haven't heard about it. It's certainly not been mentioned on any of the training and courses that I've been on. There are various researchers at various universities, though, studying the genetics of harvest mice, and they're particularly interested in how the pockets of harvest mice in inner cities, for example, are getting more and more, the genetics are getting weakened because, of course, they're inbreeding more and more, and therefore there are quite a few problems. I do know that with captive harvest mice, lots of the captive harvest mice that people have all descend from the Cheptezou population, and therefore there's a very small gene pool, and you get quite a lot of problems coming out. So Sue Smallshire, for example, had various mice that one didn't have one only had one eye, not two. There was another with a jaw problem. Yeah, so it's definitely, the genetics are an issue, and where the population is being squeezed into smaller and smaller pockets, for example, around housing developments, it is going to be an issue. And I think it might have been Brighton University, but I was contacted by a researcher recently who would like me to, when I catch mice, to pluck a few hairs so that she can have them for research purposes to monitor exactly that.
Yeah, interesting. Are there any recognised disease or pesticide pressures on harvest mice populations?
Not explicitly that I'm aware of. However, if you're using an insecticide, then obviously anything that's affected by that will then go through the food chain, and it will have a result. So although I might not know about it with harvest mice, I do know, for example, with bats, there was a colony of lesser horseshoe bats near Beer recently that was severely impacted by, there were arable fields nearby that were sprayed with pesticide, and we had 6 bats drop dead within 3 days. So they'd obviously eaten the prey. The prey was obviously affected by the pesticide, but was still alive at the time, because they don't eat dead stuff. And then they went back, and unfortunately they did drop dead. So yes, so I would say it probably is a problem, but it's not one that we know very much about at the moment.
Okay. There's a couple of questions here, one from Simon and one from PF. How many litters a year, and how big are the litters?
Yeah, so you're probably very aware that I had far too many slides, and I'm sorry about that, but there's so much information I'd have liked to share that I couldn't. So litter sizes sort of can be 8 to 12 pups, and so they're born the size of your thumbnail, so they're very, very small. They can easily have 3 litters a year. They can have up to 10. So they can breed every few weeks. So for example, you can start off with your female harvest mouse. The males aren't involved at all. The female will have a litter of babies. They stay in the nest about 16 days or so. By the time they leave, she's probably pregnant already. And then she'll have another litter of babies. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to do that. Hopefully, can you still see me? Yep.
Yes.
I had a low battery warning. So her babies would then be independent within 16 days. She'll probably be pregnant again, and then it carries on and carries on. And if you think each female can then have 8 to 12 babies within a few weeks, that's why they're a boom and bust species. They can really boom very quickly.
Produce very quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. How do you persuade farmers that harvest mice are good guys?
Well, they don't do any harm. I think they're super cute. Quite often when I'm running training sessions and surveys, I would take the harvest mice with me so that people can see them for themselves. And it doesn't have to be any radical change. It could just be a strip of longer grass on the side of a hedge. It doesn't have to be anything sort of particularly difficult or hard to manage. And lots of farmers, of course, already have that. So it's just about making sure that you look after it. So, for example, cocksfoot grass, where they particularly like to be, won't be any good the first year because it's too thin. But by the time it's been there a couple of years, then it's superb habitat. And it's just about not raising everything to the ground every year.
Yeah. That's it, I think, for the questions. I think we've come to the end. So thanks, Sarah. That's great.
Thank you, and thank you very much, John, for turning over all those pages. Couldn't have done it without you.
Sarah, thank you so much. Obviously, it was a fascinating talk for all of our audience because they appear to have stuck with us all the way through our shenanigans and got to the end and listened even through all the questions as well. So well done to them, and thank you to you as well. A fascinating talk, learned lots. Anybody who's interested is encouraged to get in touch with Sarah, and what I will do is I will have a discussion with Sarah about the best way to contact her and put that out in our newsletter so that you can get some feedback from people as well. But a very fascinating subject and beautifully presented. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you.